viewers, guests, interlopers, this is beyond anything that could possibly have been hoped for. It is the ColemanNation live stream with the vaudeville reunion of Dave, Jeff, and Ron. Thank you all
from the Catskills.
Oh yeah.
Thank you all for coming. Please don't ask us to do the old routines. That's the only thing we ask. This is a new.
It's all new material. It's all new
material. All right. So this is how it's going to be. We thank those of you who are watching us. Are we alive? Anyone see whether we're good on Twitter? Because I want to make sure I'm not just talking to the three of us.
Yeah. Let's take a look at Twitter and find out.
I am. And I don't know that I see the stream.
Oh, look at that. I see it. It's up.
Oh, you do now?
Yep.
Beaut.
Oh yeah, look at that.
Okay. So I'll take your word for it.
Okay,
Unless
turn it off, because otherwise I'm gonna. Okay.
All right, good. So maybe I'm on the other account. All right. We apologize to everyone for, as we said, this is a debut, and I wouldn't want to go so far as to say that this is a beta test, because this is the real thing. Oh, there we are, and we look fantastic. We had a little bit of an argument, of course, right before we started. Does everyone? I'm just going to assume that anyone who knows who I am knows who Dave Reaboi is and who Jeff Ballabon is. All you have to do is click the names, right? And then you know that's the beauty part of how this stuff works. It occurred to me before we started that based on what's hot in the news that comes through my feed these days, and based on stuff that I see Jeff has gotten himself a little bit involved in, and not much more than that, because I'm not so sure that this is a big Dave issue, but I think he does have an opinion in the category of not quite having an opinion. What's all this I hear about BDS and Ben and Jerry's and the First Amendment? In fact, I was seeing Glenn Greenwald having a major meltdown because
it doesn't take much. I mean, it doesn't take much. This is a particular issue for Glenn, and I like Glenn. Glenn has great takes in many ways, but the guy definitely has a 20-year history or more of kind of public Israel fixation, and that Israel fixation today has now expanded and metastasized. Now he's got a Saudi Arabia and Egypt fixation,
right?
Which is really weird. Like he's like Cairo and Riyadh, and I challenged him on it. We went back and forth. I mean, like, you can't actually think that Saudi Arabia and Egypt is worse than Pakistan and Iran.
Anybody
by any measure
normalized with the Jewish state is a target now in a certain political mind.
Yes,
but
yes,
especially,
yes.
but he's upset. This has been a long time obsession of his. I agree, and I stayed very far away from him for a very long time. Not because I view all things through the lens of whether or not someone supports Israel, as Jeff has pointed out. That's a complicated issue for Jews and for Orthodox Jews with any kind of, head on their shoulders. But when you see someone who is obsessed with an issue and can always be counted on to come out against, regardless of what the controversy might be, that tells you that someone's got a problem. Nonetheless, the issue is a fair one. Some people have asked me to comment on it, and I didn't feel all that qualified, partially because from the point of view is there some kind of problem with these anti-BDS statutes, and not being intimately familiar with what they do and say, I wouldn't want to answer, and I wasn't in a position to answer, whether they are their First Amendment viewpoint, non-viewpoint neutral thing, or whether they just have to do with city contracts or state contracts. Jeff, do you know more about this than I do? I think you do.
I think I know a little more about this than you do. So here's the way the laws have been drafted, and there are laws that were passed. I think now it's 33 states, so a solid majority of the states. And actually, yesterday I took part in my local town, passed I think the first municipal anti-BDS law back in 2016, and I was involved in that. And yesterday they called together the town officials and they announced that they were going to boycott not just Ben and Jerry's, but Unilever. Now, in response to Ben and Jerry's announcement that they were going to boycott Israel, which is a shorthand thing to say. It's more complicated than that. But what's interesting is that, now it shouldn't matter that it's a town, but I'll just plug the town. It's the town of Hempstead, Long Island, which is bigger than 5 states. I mean, it's hugely populous. It's the biggest town in America, and
it's the biggest town in America. Meaning, it's not a city.
It's not a city. It's a town.
It's a town. Uh-huh.
It's got about 800,000 residents, which puts it bigger than about 5 or 6 U.S. states. So it's not insignificant. And it was funny. One of the reporters challenging the town supervisor said, "Are you saying that you're going to tell all the local supermarkets not to carry all Unilever products, including Hellmann's and Lipton and Breyers also?" And he said, I hadn't even thought of that. But sometimes the best ideas come from residents. That's what we're going to do. And she said, "I'm not a resident." She was an ABC reporter. So let's talk about what this actually means. There are people who are concerned about the First Amendment, and the ACLU has led a charge against these anti-BDS laws. Now, the ACLU's position on its face is absurd when you compare it to its stance on, for example, what to do about bakeries that don't want to bake cakes that they like. Okay, so they flip-flop based on the issue that they like. So the problem when it comes to the BDS situation is it's actually not a constitutional issue, because there's nothing about these statutes. Well, I shouldn't speak for all 33. There's nothing about the ones that were drafted correctly that says that it punishes in any way somebody's speech or right to boycott, or right to say, forget about boycotting Israeli policies. I hate Jews. I hate Israel. They're allowed to do that all day long, and nothing stops them. What this case does, it says that just like, and this is the Supreme Court has held constitutional, the ability for states to have fair business practices, including anti-discrimination rules, if your boycott or other program against Israel goes over the line into discrimination, then the state can say, we're not going to conduct business with you. That happens all day long. The states routinely say they have laws passed and localities have regulations about not doing business with a Nazi group, okay,
right,
or with anyone who discriminates. So that's essentially these BDS legislations, anti-BDS legislations, mirror those rulings and that law to say that it only affects discrimination in commerce, discriminatory commercial conduct rather. The problem is that people use the word boycott, and the word boycott sounds like free speech, and so it gets roped into that. But really, it's just very limited. It is a narrow thing. The state's saying, we will not do business. We will not contract with someone who's violating our anti-discrimination laws. The obverse of that, right, it would be to say a state is forced to do business with, and that's definitely not the case. States, we already know that the Supreme Court has ruled, it's NAACP v. Claiborne, I think, that the state has the right to regulate economic activity, but you can't completely prohibit nonviolent, politically motivated boycotts. That's not what's happening here. Hope that makes sense.
Well, I mean, that's pretty good. That helps me. And Dave, before we went on, made a really important point, which I'm going to ask him to repeat here, because it actually comports with my spidey sense on how I've been dealing with this on social media. I've been getting tons of retweet requests in my DMs regarding every little thing having to do with this Ben and Jerry stuff, which, forget it from Jeff, I know that it's carefully curated, but not everyone, this isn't the main issue the freaking Ben and Jerry's ice cream and the Jews is not the main issue on everybody's mind in America. And there's an extent, and some of my friends, some of my Jewish activist friends are positively frantic about it. And I understand that they feel that you can't legitimize that, for a business and a brand as big as Ben and Jerry's to legitimize this kind of discrimination, which has it in it. BDS is an anti-Semitic concept. So I get that. But you also have to be sensitive to what the rest, to Americans who are generally supportive of Israel, what they think in terms of priorities.
Can I jump in here for a second?
No, you can actually not jump in. That was all the setup.
That was
for
the
you.
setup. That was the setup. Okay, I'm gonna say something that may piss people off, but I don't think so. If you kind of anyway, I think we, let's say the three of us all kind of live in a bubble. And we all live
That's
in bubbles.
Going to be a pretty big bubble.
Yeah. No. I mean, we all live in bubbles on social media, to some extent. So of course, what we're seeing a lot of the activist, pro-Israel, Jewish folks who are kind of saying this. Now, we are in that thing. That's what we see. If we think, hey, maybe they're making too much of, one issue or the other, not even Ben and Jerry's, but, more broadly. That's something that we see because we are sort of in it. I think if we would be in a Black bubble or a gay bubble or a Latino bubble or what have you, whatever, indigenous persons. I mean, whatever you think of, you will see a lot of the folks in activism pushing a bunch of things that we who are kind of, let's say, more generalist oriented would think are maybe small fry or small potatoes. And
politics itself is a bubble. I mean, I'm sure most of it is more about, sports and music.
Right. Yeah, of course. And what ends up happening, I think, or what it did end up happening is that you had, I mean, I'm not even sure where it started, but you had the kind of, creation of these, I don't know, I want to say like pressure groups, not even pressure groups, but pressure communities, who are just kind of obsessed with their issue in particular. And they just keep pushing it. And you have a lot of that. And when you're in it or when you're surrounded by it, you tend to see something else. You tend to see, this kind of thing. It comes out in a kaleidoscopic way. So, I'm not sure if, I know, Ron, you get some retweet requests about this kind of stuff, and I do too, on one issue or the other. I mean, it doesn't stop. You have a lot of people who are organized, in this community and in other communities, and God bless them. They believe in something, they want something. But if you kind of step outside of it, you have, it kind of takes on a different flavor. Now the thing that's kind of not so good is that when you have a lot of folks who are concerned, let's say in this case, I mean, by no means is it exclusive to people in the pro-Israel community, but when you have a bunch of folks who are, who spend their time as like, this is my most important issue, I'm going to talk about this, then it looks from the outside like they really don't care about anything else, and it's got a kind of optics issue.
Well,
are we getting to the dual loyalty or lack of loyalty issue?
No, I mean, it's not. It's. I wouldn't say I wouldn't put it that way. I mean, that's how it comes across sometimes. That's certainly how it comes across sometimes. I mean, I don't think it's necessarily legitimate, but it's, I mean, a lot of folks certainly do no favors when it comes to that. Those optics.
Actually, I couldn't agree more. My first political life was really in policy on the Hill, and it was only years later I got sucked into political campaigning issues, and my set of professional experiences and expertises have to do with messaging, law, whatever. All of a sudden, well, I'm the guy with the yarmulke, so let's throw the Jewish questions or the Israel questions to him, right? And it was a very hard decision to accept those. And I did it because I was in a place where there was no one else who even knew what the heck they were talking about. So I had to do it. But once that happened, that was it. Like, oh, well, you're going to be the Jewish guy. You're going to be the Jewish expert. And by the way, this is a little bit amusing, I guess. But a couple of years ago on Christmas Eve, I was in the Fox green room because, let's face it, who else is going to be in the Fox green room on Christmas Eve besides, right?
Right.
So I was there for a series of, there were 3 different shows I had to be on spread out over a couple of hours. And it was just a skeleton crew. There was no one. There's one woman who was there. It was like the greeter who was with me I did a couple of hits, but basically I spent almost 2 hours in that room with her, and 1 or 2 other people would come in or out. And one of those other guys happened to wear a yarmulke. And at the end, I asked her a question. She gave me an answer that made no sense. And I realized she thought I was the other guy with the yarmulke. And this guy didn't have a beard, wasn't wearing glasses. Okay. I said, I'm sorry, do we just all look alike to you? Which was intended to be kind of a joke because, she was African-American and she reacted to it. I said, no, honestly, this happens to me all the time in Washington. People constantly mistake me for some other guy with a yarmulke who I don't think looks like me at all. But it's just the ways people just do a shorthand, and they that's the recollection if they don't know you. So unfortunately, there was a lot of that. But I want to actually challenge your point of view in just a little bit, which is, I hate the idea that this issue is seen as an issue that's owned by Jews. Okay, this is an American foreign policy issue. Okay, now it's an American domestic policy issue relating to the treatment of Jews, so that should be a concern about Jews. But I hate the idea that the foreign policy issue is treated as though it's a Jewish issue, and on all sides. I hate the idea that Jews suggest they have a right to speak out more about it because they're Jewish. They don't, or the people who somehow infer that we have some expertise if we don't, or have some responsibility for a decision made by a foreign government, which we don't. I can't tell you how many politicians of both parties have said your government when they're talking about Israel. I'm an American. I've never been an Israeli. And I always think, you're my government, guys. Stop it. But we can say it all we want. That's just the perception. But, Krauthammer, I think in his book, Things That Matter, I think that was the name of it. So I'm not a huge fan of reading books like that in general of anybody's, but I decided once that I thought about writing. I thought he's a good writer. Let me read what he writes. And he writes a very important thing in his introduction. He writes, I wanted to write this book about everything besides politics. I wanted to write about music, art, chess, sports, everything I love, okay? Psychology, whatever, everything I love. And yet it ended up being the bulk of this is about politics, because try as I might, the truth is all those things I want to get to in life, I can't get to if our system is collapsing. These things take precedence. And I will say that the same way Washington is downstream from culture on a lot of issues that concern all of us, that have nothing to do uniquely with Jews or Israel, that a culture starts normalizing a certain perception or certain discourse about Jews is something which is a warning signal, not just for us, but for the culture. And that's historically always been true. And I genuinely think it's true in America today. And I wish this were a bigger issue for more people. And I think if it's in a bubble, it shouldn't be in a bubble.
Very interesting. That's a very nuanced perspective, because I still think to some extent, David's saying the optics are not so great, and you're saying that's the problem. That's exactly the problem, is that we're allowing ourselves to be boxed in by optics, or boxed in by expectations about what certain tweets or what certain positions mean for us, that wouldn't apply to other interest groups.
Right. Anyway.
All right. Well, that I think is. I think a lot that quite a few people are interested in this, but not as. I felt we had to do it some justice because I know that I actually, before Dave came on to join the group, that it was probably going to be a something that you and I would want to talk about, and Dave actually said, "I don't have an opinion, and here's what it is."
Right. Well, look. I mean, I don't think these laws are necessarily bad. I mean, we should start. I think conservatives should start playing by these rules. I mean, let's have it. Let's have. If you're a woke corporation that, that, for example, uses CRT as kind of HR policy. Okay. You're not doing business with the state of Texas or Florida. I mean, I don't see why that should be a problem.
So I agree with that, but I will say, so now I'm going to take the flip side because, hey, that's what I do.
Sure.
I was not in love, even though I was involved in the passage of these laws. My focus was on making sure that if they were going to do it anyway, they do it constitutionally. All right. But I'm not in love.
You're the last man in America that cares about that stuff. The thing that bothers me about the whole idea of legislating it, and the legislators wanted to legislate this. I mean, it's not as though we had to persuade them. They were raring to go. Okay. And that's the thing. Outside our bubble, the reality is this does concern millions and millions of people who care about the way Jews are treated. And it's a marker for them about our civilization. It's a true marker for literally millions of people who are not Jews in this country, and a lot of them are in the state legislatures. And so, in consulting with them, my first argument was, I'd rather you not pass a law about this, because in my view, once something is legislated or litigated, I mean, we just saw, Mississippi is now going after Roe versus Wade. That's fine. The problem with Roe versus Wade was once they jumped over the cultural decision-making process, right, it became endlessly armed combat, and no position was considered too extreme. And my problem with this is that when it comes to anti-Semitism, abortion went from safe, legal, and rare to you should get pregnant in order to abort, and that's virtue signaling. So that's the thing about anti-Semitism. It's going to go from, oh, no, we don't like Israel, but we're not anti-Semitic, to, heck, yes, we're anti-Semites, because once the government starts telling you can't be something, then millions of Americans will want to be that thing. And so I don't love this at all, but this is where we are. I think that's a great point.
Yeah.
Uh-oh. We agree.
Yeah. 3 Jews, 1 opinion. Never happened.
It happens here.
Maybe we should. Well, not only that, just 3 Jews, 1 face. You know how many tweets? This is now. I'm reinforcing this, and it's funny because this is a great lesson in pattern recognition. Because nobody who knows any one of us or both of us, we don't look alike at all to each other at all. At all.
That's right, Dave. You don't look at all like. Oh, sorry.
I remember my college roommate went to China after we graduated, and he said, once you spend time in China, all Chinese don't look alike to you at all because you start to see lots and lots of Chinese. I do think, however, people have been seeing Jews with beards for a while. Of course, Reaboi is hardly even. I mean, what do you call that, man?
This is not a beard. This is not a beard. Yeah. This is just. It gets more gray. It's got. I mean, in the last year, man, it's white now, and it's my mom thinks that I look like a homeless derelict.
Well, at least, she's saying it out of love. You know that.
Of course. Dave,
what's late Republic nonsense? I'm seeing that you're stripping that into your title.
I'm stripping it into everything. Yeah, it's my new Substack, which is where I'm doing a bunch of different things, doing some writing, doing some podcast audio and video conversations. Going to be doing some other fun stuff soon that I've been working on, doing a cooking video with Michael Anton, which is going to be the next thing.
I want you to know, thanks
Yeah.
to Late Republic Nonsense, Dave, I actually went back and watched Alien without audio.
Oh, no kidding.
Loved it. No, because I decided I want because of Amanda's comment.
Because Amanda, right?
Yeah, and I said, that's fascinating. And I always liked Geiger, and I always liked I was obsessed by his art, which is kind of a weird thing to say, but it's true. But I wanted to see the movie itself, and from the opening of it without audio, it's spectacular.
Wow. Okay, I'm going to try that. Now, what did you do for audio? Did you sit in silence?
I listened to Ron.
You did what?
I did other stuff, so I wasn't obsessively watching it the whole time. It was like on the screen, on a big screen in front of me, while I was doing things. I don't know if someone should sit there for 2 hours and just absorb it that way.
Right.
But it's definitely worth trying. Just start at the beginning and spend a few minutes watching it. It's magnificent.
What are you guys talking about? What are you talking about?
We're talking about Reaboi being the new cultural Mandarin, I guess.
Oh, so that would be an example of Late Republic Nonsense, I guess.
I did a podcast with Amanda Milius, and she mentioned how much she loves Alien, the film, just visually. And Jeff went and he I guess he decided to watch it with no sound.
Oh, to test the visually hypothesis.
Just look at and that's
which is why a lot of people will be watching this video, by the way, for years to come, entirely for the visual.
Yeah.
It's so I'm also excited. I did a great one with Walter Kern, the novelist and the writer, which was great, which is probably going to come out later today.
Wait, so it's a Substack and it's a podcast?
It's a Substack, it's a podcast.
It's a floor wax?
It's a floor wax. It's, we'll shine your shoes, all of it. And really, I wanted to do something that is interdisciplinary and not be tied to sort of the same thing all the time. And I didn't
Hold on a second. Let's take a step back.
Politics all the time. Okay.
Let's face it, Dave, no one knows what you really do. I mean, you say interdisciplinary, but what is
the discipline?
What's the discipline that you want to distinguish yourself from? You're like professional Dave Reaboi.
Right. Well, look, I mean, which
I guess we all are in our own way as well, especially since we all have the same face. But
right. No, but that's a pretty good. I mean, that's not a bad, mystique. So nobody knows what he does.
As long as you can pay the rent.
Certainly not. On a trust fund kid. But no. I mean, what do? I've worked in comms for almost 20 years here.
You just said a word.
Yes.
Comms.
Yeah,
that means
strategic communications.
Correct. Corporate and strategic communications. So you and Jeff actually have very, very similar backgrounds.
And no one knows what I do either, which is exactly perfect.
Right. No. I mean, it's beautiful. I mean, right now I'm I have a couple of little contracts and ranging from little and big I mean, I only take gigs that I believe in, which maybe is a little foolish of me on the business end, but I just couldn't live with myself if I helped out folks that I didn't like or that I thought were doing damage to the country or something else.
Yeah, we're in this regard we look the same also. The three of us.
Yeah, we all have made that choice in life, I think.
How much easier would it have been? It would have been a lot easier. And maybe smarter. Who knows?
You say easier, but it's legitimately, you get to a point where you realize you just can't do it. It's simply not tenable. It's not even a choice at some point. It's a choice between living with yourself and feeling sick.
Right. Yeah. And it's like, and once you've been doing it for a while, for example, I mean, I've spent, more than a decade dealing with Muslim Brotherhood, and Islamist stuff, kind of from a doctrinal and organizational perspective. And it's like, okay, this is what I do. If someone wants to, enlist my, if someone wants my help on a project where we're going to be talking about this, then yeah, of course, I'll come in and I'll do my thing. Which is how the kind of the Qatar focus came about. Qatar for me is not the main attraction. The main attraction is the fact that you've got a very small, very wealthy country that is with petrodollars fueling Muslim Brotherhood organization and doctrine. And that's the interesting part to me. So that's why I got into Qatar. And
are we the only guys who say Qatar? Because I'm always hearing Americans.
Qatar?
I mean, Qatar, like the stuff you
I
spray
say
on your
Qatar.
arms.
I mean, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. I mean, our friend Jordan Schechtel says gutter just to piss them off, which is not bad. But I just say Qatar because it's easy and anyone can say it, and it's not incorrect.
I have no opinion.
But anyway, I would encourage you to subscribe to Late Republic Nonsense, because it's there's going to be some really fun stuff happening.
So how does someone do that? How would they find?
How does someone do that?
If they Google it, will they find it?
Yeah, if you go to davereaboi.com, you will see the first link is to that Substack, or you go to davereaboi.substack.com, you'll get it there. Or just go to my Twitter and you'll see it's the first the first link. And highly
recommended for the same reason that we started. It's part of the same discussion at the beginning, which is we interact sometimes with the public more, along these lines of what we're expected to interact, but our lives are much richer and fuller than that. And there are other things we'd rather be spending our, frankly, people like us who do what we believe in, sometimes it's because we've got something like, oh my God, this is a disaster. I think I could do something about it. So I step into the breach.
Right. Like who else is going to do it?
Right.
Yeah.
And there are a million other things I'd actually rather be doing. And so people constantly come up to me to talk about politics. I don't care about politics at all. I don't pay attention to it at all. People kids will come up to me asking me questions like I'm an expert. They know much more than I do about like the daily intricacies of that boring, ugly people soap opera that goes on in Washington. All right. I care about big picture issues and trends and things that are happening there. And politics sometimes become necessary. But there's so many other things I care about that I'd rather spend my time on when I don't have to spend my time on politics.
Like what?
I'll tell you, it's embarrassing. No. No,
Geiger.
My original focus is really English lit. That's really what I cared about, and that's what I wanted to focus on. Poetry, literature, that's what I enjoy. Okay, I haven't had the time to indulge in that recently at all. Once in a while, I'll come across an author that I'll just fall in love with and obsess over, and try to find some free time to read it. By the way, the thing about getting a white beard is, in recent years, like very recent years, used to be I would just grab any book and start reading it and not care. All of a sudden I'm thinking, you're not going to be able to read any book before you go. Now you got to make choices, that was like the first intimation of mortality for me was I have to choose what I read, not just read everything that interests me that I come across. And there are other things as well, but yes, Ron.
I've known you for what, 40, 50 years now?
No, really?
100.
That long?
I don't think it's been 40.
No, Jeff and I know each other
from the Stegel?
From the old country.
Exactly.
From the old country.
25 years. Let's say,
I did not know that you had this interest. I mean, I know that you're very good with the words. I guess that's where you find them.
With the words. Yeah, well, you could just get a dictionary and have no books and get all the words. It's a question of how you put them together.
This just changes the whole way I see you now.
So what was the most recent obsession? Who was the most recent?
Yeah. Test him, Dave.
So it's not my most recent obsession, but I'll tell you my favorite authors. Hands down. And I'll turn some time to them. Robertson Davies, Canadian author.
No.
Okay. Robertson Davies has a series of trilogies: the Deptford trilogy, the Cornish trilogy, the Salterton trilogy, and then he has a couple of books that started into being a trilogy. He has essays. The guy, I love what he writes. I can't describe exactly, but he was the first since college. He was the first author that I read that I found myself obsessively taking notes in marginalia. Then I'll tell you the most recent book I read that I thought was the dumbest book I've ever read in my life. And I became obsessed by how stupid it was. Okay. I couldn't stop reading it because it was the most eye-opening glimpse into the other side. So I was traveling, was going to take a long flight, and ran into Barnes and Noble to get something on the way. And it was a buy one, get one. So I bought what I wanted to read. And then I said, well, let me find what everybody else is reading. So I find a book, and the blurbs on the cover are Bill Gates and Barack Obama. And they're saying this is the most brilliant book ever written in Western civilization. So I've got to read this book. And it's Sapiens by Yuval Noah Harari.
Oh, okay. I've got it. I haven't read it.
I think it is the dumbest book I've ever read in my life. It's extraordinary. I couldn't put it down because what
it was like, even in the sense of like watching a car crash kind of thing.
Well, it's sort of like that, but it's everything that obsesses me about culture. Okay, here's the thing. Because I grew up from birth in an Orthodox Jewish environment, I've always had this kind of inside-outside relationship with popular culture, right? I've always felt as an outsider, but I've been fully familiar with it. And this is the attempt to write an entire coherent leftist narrative. This is the way the left tries to view the world. Because the left's narrative simply doesn't stand up to empirical reality, which is why they get so, this is my big theory, why they get so crazy, why they call speech violence, because humans as cognitive creatures, right? That's our key element, all right? In rabbinic terms, Ron, that's where medaber, we're those that articulate abstract thoughts, okay? Which is a different category than any other creature. So we're cognitive, and whereas every other being, its existence, its survival mechanism is rooted in its physical survival. Humans clearly aren't that way. Humans make all kinds of dumb decisions that could lead to our imminent deaths, but usually they're tied into some obsession that we have, which is a narrative. What will always survive is our cognitive narrative self. That's what our survival is linked to. And so if I tell you, by the way, I'm not Jeff anymore, I'm Jessica, and I'm a woman, you're not offended by that, you're not threatened by that, you're not hurt by that. You might offends or threatens you. But if I tell you that and then you say, no, you're not, because nothing about me physically suggests that I'm really a woman and Jessica, the only thing I have is my narrative, and you're challenging that. You're literally trying to annihilate me. I think that flows down through the left's entire structure. Okay.
But why is the left? So why is that more important to the left?
This book is an attempt.
Why is that? Why is that connection between narrative and life force, or that sort of prime value? Why is that more important to people on the left? The people who are not on the left.
What I'm saying is that the core difference is whether you are tied to empirical reality. It's the same reason the left is so intolerant of dissent, right? Why do you care? Why can't we have an argument? I mean, God, you go to yeshiva and your best friend is the guy you could fight, you could beat the heck out of you intellectually, and he's beating the heck out of you because you learn through argument. But now argument is considered violence and it's not safe spaces. Why is that? Why are people? Because if the story I tell myself doesn't comport to outside reality and all I have is a story, then you're challenging it. You're literally trying to annihilate me. Whereas opposed to, the right, okay, so you think something different than I think. All right, we'll see what's right.
Right. And there is an external reality that exists that you've got to contend with, whatever your narrative is.
Right. So this book, I mean, I was obsessed over it because on almost every page, there were multiple comments that were so clearly, if my kid came home in 5th grade and thought this, I would be very upset at their schooling because it's just so illogical. And so it doesn't comport with reality. All right. It's just such, it doesn't bother me that you have a narrative. It doesn't bother me that you have a polemic. It's painful that it so clearly doesn't comport with reality. It self-contradicts.
And they're getting
right now, I'm trying to think.
I think I've had that experience with a book, but most recently, I mean, the big one was I have a friend who recommended this show on Amazon. It was several years ago now. I got in 2017, and I was sort of recuperating from an injury and a surgery, and she's like, "You need to see this show on Amazon. Promise me you'll give it a chance despite its name." And I said, "Okay, why not?" And it was the show was called I Love Dick. I was like, "All right, I'm gonna watch the show, see what happens." The show was so bad that I could not stop watching. It was so bad. It was like I can't believe it. This is horrible. This is the worst thing I've ever seen. I mean, I had contempt for everyone who worked on the show. I had contempt for the people who were like, the caterers delivering the food. I thought this was just it was an abomination, but I watched to the end because could this possibly get worse? And unfortunately they canceled it after the first season.
Because they probably realized it could not get worse.
It could get worse.
And then it might start improving and they would lose their audience.
Right. But it was actually, I mean, the premise of it was actually pretty good. Though interestingly enough, it was a cuck story. It was a cuckold story, but it was set in Marfa in Texas, which is the town that's really in the middle of nowhere, and you've got to go out, several hours drive from anywhere. There's no airport nearby, and it's a sort of it's set in an artist colony. But of course, it's like very beautiful. The setting is very beautiful. But other than that, man, what a horrible show. But I encourage you to see it because it's like, if you think it can't get that bad, it can get that bad in spades.
By the way, I'm going to now recommend to you, because the two most recent books that I read that I ended up recommending to people in my inner circle of my family, my father, right? Just there's a book, Caravaggio, by a guy whose last name is Har. I think it's Har, which is spectacular. It's a true story.
Is it about the painter?
Yeah, it's a true story about a lost painting by Caravaggio, but it's written spectacularly well, and I just couldn't. I loved it so much. And the other book is a more popular book, which is A Gentleman in Moscow, Immortals are Told, which I thought was.
I'm sorry, which one was it?
A Gentleman in Moscow, Amor Tolls, Towles. Just a beautiful, beautiful read, and it is about putting the words together. And when the language matches the story, I don't know how to describe it better than that. There's something so immersive in that experience, and that's what I found with reading this book by Tolles. It was just an immersive, beautiful experience.
Oh, it looks beautiful. A story about a man who is ordered to spend the rest of his life inside a luxury hotel.
Right.
Huh. Interesting.
It's about a Russian aristocrat, and during the revolution, that's what he's forced to do that. But it's so beautifully constructed. So anyway, those are the two most recent books that I read that I really love.
Well, I feel very left out here because I'm not someone who appreciates literature at all. In fact, I'm against it and think it should be banned.
I'm against it.
It didn't happen, right? It didn't really happen. No, I'm kidding.
Right.
But I do not really appreciate. I read nonfiction and I read biographies, and I wish I had the appreciation.
I have the gateway drug for you.
Yeah. What would you propose that to be?
I have the gateway drug. The gateway drug is John Dos Passos, The Men Who Made the Nation. It is a book. I don't know if it's in print right now, but it should be. Dos Passos kind of famously wrote the great American novel, several times in his USA trilogy. He was a communist, and then he went with Hemingway to Spain and, got based and flipped around, and he helped Buckley Found National Review. He became an outspoken right winger. Now, of course, in the process of doing so, he was expunged from the literary canon. So now, if you will go, you'll find that his early communist work is in print. It'll always be in print. But his later conservative work is gone. It's gone. It's like, maybe, you'll be lucky if you find it.
But it's fiction. In other words, regardless of the perspective. No.
So this particular book is nonfiction, but it's told in such a good way that, and it's such a good gateway to Dos Passos' style. And he's very, very, he's dense, but he is very, he's just very descriptive. He makes up his own words, and he's just a beautiful, beautiful writer. And he goes and writes this book about, the founding of the country. And it's all real events. It's meticulously researched, and it's a wonderful book. And I like, everybody loves this book.
So I will definitely keep that in mind and put it on the stack. I will say, to be fair to myself, I got obsessed with the Patrick O'Brian, talk about, I don't want to say sublime to the ridiculous, the Patrick O'Brian, Jack Aubrey novels, maritime, Royal Navy historical novels about the Napoleonic Wars. And which are really known for their character, for the character development. And I really fell in love with these books and read all 20 of them during the year of COVID. And my wife kept coming in and seeing me reading this. She's saying, "Since when do you read this kind of stuff?" And the answer was,
since now.
Since now. But then I went right back to another biography of Churchill. And, I read this, I was disappointed in this because I do like to open up the Will Durant set, The Story of Civilization, but I don't think I've ever read any one of them all at once, because it strikes me.
I literally never knew they had words. I just knew the spines were nice.
Well, so I said, so I got something called The Greatest Minds of All Time and Ideas of All Time, which is a much smaller Durant book, but it turns out to have been, it's a bunch of old columns and essays of his, and he was an incredibly, talk about breadth. This guy, philosophy, art, just unbelievable. But it was put together by like a fan, the world's #1 expert on Will Durant, and some of it didn't age all that well, actually, for what it's worth. Guys, with 15 minutes left, I want to see if we can maybe get that. That was an interesting discussion. What's that?
Yeah,
it was. I think it was a pretty good discussion. I think that we showed people that.
I was going to say, the people who watch Ron Coleman care about what Jeff Ballabon reads, or do they want to hear about the stuff, that bubble stuff?
Well, but they do. They do care because people are fascinated by Jeff Ballabon and David Reaboi, and they want to know what makes guys like you tick. There is a sort of a theme to the podcast, and this we are calling this an episode of the podcast, and we've to some extent addressed it. We have fulfilled our obligation to address it. We are Yotzi, as we say, because we talked about the First Amendment in the beginning, and free speech in the beginning, not in great depth, but we're all seeing what's going on still on social media. And to me, the most exciting news and fascinating news of the week was that the White House's assertion of a week ago that they were now acknowledging that they were working with their partners, working with the social media platforms to choose winners and losers in the free market of information, was so over the top that even the American Civil Liberties Union had to finally say something this week. That's mind-boggling to me. How could that possibly have happened? That they went. You would think that everything coming out of the Democratic Party, which is the White House today, would be pre-vetted and focus grouped, and here we are. They actually stood up for civil liberty. What do you guys think is going on? Did they misjudge over in the White House? Jeff?
I don't. Okay. Go ahead.
Dave?
No,
Dave? Jeff?
Hey, Dave.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I have, I guess from experience, I may have a more cynical take on how some of this stuff happens.
More cynical than Jeff and Ron. Okay, that's you're throwing down.
Probably. Yeah, I mean, just based on my experience, a lot of this stuff is kind of haphazardly done often.
You mean stuff like with Jen Psaki?
Like with the rollouts. Now, obviously, when the Trump presidency was the apex of haphazard rollout. So this is not that. This is also not necessarily, the Iran deal. It's not necessarily a sort of hyper organized layout thing. A rollout thing. I think in this case, you just had them kind of saying stuff. And maybe they got ahead of things. But on the other hand, as far as the ACLU goes, like, okay, they're filthy commies. And they've been completely, they've gone completely woke in the last couple of years when it comes to really all of these issues. And they're just, naked, ridiculous partisans. So when they come out and they do something out of character, the first thing I always think of is, maybe it's a donor. Maybe it's one stray donor who gives them, $15 million a year. And they're like, you know what, we need to be responsive. Even though our staff is against it, we don't want to lose the money, blah, 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 blah. This is the kind of thing that happens in nonprofits all day long.
That did occur to me. That angle of it did occur to me. Jeff, what do you think? You've been you know this world pretty well too.
Yeah, I'm largely in line with Dave on this. I think that it's not that there are never big conspiracies, but most things that happen that look like conspiracies are just, clumsy cascades. That's really what's going on. And also every once in a while, there's an interest in a group in taking a stance here about something which is pretty straightforward and relatively easy because, it allows them to say, what are you talking about? We obviously took a stance on this issue, so we're not totally in the tank. There's a little bit of that, but why on this issue, it is likely a money issue. Look, these organizations on the right and the left, this is just a criticism of organizations, right? And they have their own life cycle and their own need to survive and their own, we're talking about survival instincts, their own survival instincts. And so they're making decisions, the other thing about the three of us, by the way, since we've chosen to lead lives really based on what we believe in, is we're not really big organizational guys. We're not really, and that's part of it because organizations will constantly subsume decisions based on some calculus about what's better for their interests. And by the way, the organizational interest really meaning the interest of the people in charge of the organization's decisions at that moment. And so usually it's something very basic, very simple. And organizations, I'm sorry to say, the big organizations that have lasted any period of time, it's just like in corporate America. Innovation tends not to come out of mega corporations, right? Because there are too many other stresses on their continued existence. It comes out of upstarts. Big organizations, right and left, tend to be fairly predictable, fairly staid, and focused more or less on their budgets more than anything else.
I will just say, and here I'll depart from what you guys have said in one respect. What I noticed on Wednesday, and I noticed it even, this was a week ago Wednesday, when I was very cognizant of this, especially because of the O'Handley, the DC Drano case that we filed in California, Harmeet Dillon and I and our partners, in which he alleges, based on smoking gun emails obtained by Judicial Watch, that the Secretary of State of California, in association with 22 other secretaries of state, as well as the National Association of secretaries of state were selecting tweets and social media statements by leading influencers like DC Drano, who has 3 million or so. Is it 2 or 3? I always forget. Followers on Instagram, and telling Twitter to ban users. Red-handed state action. That we filed that about 3 weeks ago now in the Central District of California. Psaki essentially admitted on behalf of the administration on Wednesday that the White House, which is not a party to our suit, the federal government, that the White House is doing just be more or less the same thing under the banner of misinformation. We've got to save the world from misinformation. Did she mean misinformation like the Russia hoax? No. Did she mean misinformation like any number of other things, like everything ever uttered by, prominent members of certain political parties? No, she meant things like maybe you should speak to your doctor about whether the vaccine is good. In any event, she was very, very careful in her wording and very deliberate. But after the initial firestorm on Wednesday, she came back out on Thursday and read another similar statement in response to a question. And remember, we know that these questions are pre-staged, and read what looked to me to be an extremely well-prepared statement that someone would go to a Jeff Ballabon or a David Reaboi on the left to prepare. They spent at least that second night, and certainly, if not both nights, before those press conferences, deciding what they were going to announce, and for a reason, which we don't necessarily know. Was it because more of this stuff is going to come out and they want to get ahead of it? Is it because they think this is the moment of peak? What can we get away with? I don't know. But I do think you're both right that probably someone who matters a lot to the ACLU said, guys, this is a line that you can't let cross. I do think that that's the case. And I think it does tend to prove that even if there was planning on the White House level, it doesn't mean that there was a big Zoom call with all the bêtes noires, on there, and the ADL and the Rothschilds and the, George Soros, all deciding, what are we going to do to undermine democracy tomorrow?
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's right. These guys are giving it a test drive. They're giving tyranny a test drive, and I think that
that's a pretty good catchphrase.
Yeah, it's not bad.
Give tyranny a test drive.
What they've been doing over the last several years is kind of bringing domestic politics into the realm of national security. We saw this with the Russia hoax. And we're seeing it with this. They've got two tracks. One is national security. The other track is health. And they're going to
and the complete climate. I mean, the complete collapse of life as we know it.
Sure. Okay. So three. So three.
I thought net neutrality took care of that. I always get this wrong.
Well, I'm not even sure. I mean, look, they don't even care anymore. That's the other thing about this. Okay, so the ACLU objects. The ACLU objects. I mean, at the end of the day, who cares? Do they care if this is something they really want? If they feel that they're on the cusp of achieving, what they want, which is, let's say, total information space dominance. Do they really give a damn about the ACLU?
Oh. In terms of optics, the ACLU saying what they said is of great political significance. It already means that, because there are a lot of people who let these organizations, which themselves stopped leading in terms of thought, nonetheless do the thinking for them. So I think, when we went to the Supreme Court on the Slants First Amendment / trademark case years ago,
Knew that was going to come up.
one amicus was allowed to argue before the Supreme Court, and that was the ACLU. That's the stature that they still have in American culture and law. So that was very, very important. And you know what else is going to come up? Everyone should follow Jeff Ballabon, David Reaboi, subscribe to all his late Republic nonsense, which just so happens to be in the screen right here. Okay.
Isn't that slick? That's pretty slick.
That's slick, and you have a little bit of the depth of field thing going, so it's fuzzy but eminently readable. And especially because no one's
friends, and it's very worthwhile. I'm saying this as an audience, whatever it is.
Subscriber, thank you.
Subscriber, yes.
I'm going to subscribe as soon as we get off this call. As soon as we get off this live stream, I want to thank the 14 people who, we did a little bit better than that for our inaugural. And we're going to take a pound of flesh out of Will Chamberlain next week for his last minute cancellation. This was, I think we all know, a lot more fun than it would have been with Will. But thanks everybody. Everyone have a good Shabbos. And please do subscribe to my podcast so that I'll have more subscribers. Thanks a lot, guys.
Thank you.
See ya. Thank you very much, guys.
Have a good Shabbos. Have a good weekend, everybody.
See ya.
Everybody.
Bye-bye.